Hi everybody. So as Bob has just told you, I work for CMAX, or as its full name is, the Centre for Marine and Coastal Studies, and we're based up in Liverpool. And I don't really know what to say, there was quite a lot of overlap between mine and Keith's presentations, but I'm hopefully going to try and talk more about the surveys and things that we do. You mentioned environmental impact assessments, so I'm going to try and talk about the need for why we do those in an attempt to preserve the environment, namely the marine environment. So, preserving the marine environment. Why do we need to preserve the marine environment? As Keith did say, it's because there is a growing interest in this particular area, not only from oil and gas has been for many years now, but also in the developments of ports and marinas and offshore renewable energy. So, as he said, we've got big quotas that we need to reach, and we're hoping to reach these renewable energy targets through the exploitation of better, larger energy supplies offshore. However, the reason that I'm giving you my talk today is because we also need to take into consideration the impact that developing in the offshore environment is going to have on the marine organisms that live there. So, how does my company, CMAX, or the company I work for, try to prevent any harm from happening to these organisms? So, as I've said, we are called the Centre for Marine and Coastal Studies. These are mugshots of my friends. I'm sure they'd be really pleased that I've shook them up there, noticed I'm not there. We are mainly marine biologists, but we also have a few doctors amongst us and consultants, namely Sarah, who is our fisheries consultant. She also does a lot of auditing for some fisheries abroad. And very much in the same way as Keith, which is surprising, I started off doing marine biology when I was doing my undergraduate, and then I moved off into doing offshore and ocean technology with diving, the same as him. So it's really creepy that you should have already gone through all of this. But these are some of the areas that we specialise in order to produce such things such as EIAs or environmental impact assessments, so that these developers can move into the offshore environment. So our company is thankfully made up from a lot of people who have got a lot of experience in other areas, not only globally, but the skills base that we can draw from is quite extensive. So as you can see, we have got some nice, as Keith was upset about, places that they have worked, the Red Sea and the Gulf of Mexico, but also we have some people who have had experience of more severe environments, such as the Antarctic. The skills base that we have, taxonomy, so the identification and naming of species, and a lot of the surveys that we do that Keith has actually already mentioned, subtidal, intertidal, ornithology, so that's birds, marine mammals, as I said before, fish and fisheries expertise, so we could give advice to consultancies and agencies about that, as well as giving advice about certain features such as underwater noise and electromagnetic field production that can be very much associated with renewable energy. Also we have special people from GIS who do the biotope mapping. As the maps that Keith showed you earlier, I have some too. So there you have it. So our main bulk of the work that we do is in the survey, assessment and monitoring. So as you can see here, we've got a trawling net, which is what we use to take the epibenthric sampling from the areas that the developers want to try and develop upon. And we also here think this one is the MPI, I think it might be the resolution, as Keith spoke about earlier. I think that might be the live installing probably one of the foundations for the substations where all of the energy from the offshore wind farms will go into. And then a picture of some of my colleagues digging about on the beach. So these survey, assessment and monitoring can be performed for any coastal works and development. So it's not just for renewables, as I said, but also for ports, marinas, oil and gas industry, and also things like certain airports that have been developed to go out into the offshore environment because there's not enough space on land. These processes are very much essential for obtaining the FEPA licence that Keith spoke about in order for people to get consent to develop in this area. And within this FEPA licence, in order to get it, they also have to specify any monitoring procedures that they will undertake. As a company, we've performed this process for over 20 offshore wind farms, not only in the UK and Ireland, but also in other areas further afield, such as Scandinavia. So the second part of what my company does is to provide scientific advice. This can be through the review of scientific information that we might gather or that is already in the public domain, and then we use this to liaise with environmental regulators to make sure that what the actual developers are trying to do is going to fit in with what the regulators believe is acceptable. And we also interpret lots of environmental legislation. There can be mountains of this depending on what sort of environment you're in, what sort of species may be there, and certain protocols that the developers must adhere to in order to get their license. So, as I say, by doing this, that we help to secure development licenses for developers, and by helping them to comply with environmental consent conditions. We can also then help to devise mitigating procedures to prevent against environmental impacts. So, not only is it local authorities, port and marine operators, or developers, but this is just a list of some of the people that we have worked for and that we are currently working for. I'm sure you know quite a few of them. So I'm going to go and talk about how it is that we actually gather the information in a bit more detail to put together for our environmental impact assessments. As I've said before, I showed you the net for the trawling. These are the sorts of examples of things that we pick up. So this is just one example, like thornback ray and fish, lots and lots of dead man's fingers and things like that. And also the odd like octopus that we can sometimes pick up. That will be in the trawling. We also have visual surveys, so that you don't have to really impact the benthic sediment. You can just get a camera and take still photos as well as video. So it's just really getting a characterisation of what sort of seabed conditions are present at the sites that you want to develop. And then, as you said, we've got the benthic grab. So it's basically a big bucket. You stick it over the side of the ship, and it takes up a certain amount of floor. We analyse it for particle size, composition, sometimes contaminants, and then pick out the species that are in there, seeing if anything is important. When we have this information, we then go and get our GIS people to get the information, the data, and form a biotope map. For the intertidal areas, so this is the parts where they will be exposed during low tide, we often do what some people want before they actually develop an area, because they don't really know what's there. So we have a one-off characterisation where, very similar to the grab with the bucket, we have a core we stick that in the floor, it's got a certain volume, and we analyse that over particular transects of the shore. It can be used quite extensively actually when you're trying to plot cable routes and you want to make sure that the area you're going to install them isn't going to have anything of particular interest. As I said before, particle size analysis, biotope mapping, and contaminants, it can be quite important for very polluted areas such as estuary. And as you can see from my photos, it can actually be very nice. So there's one of my colleagues running around in an Argo cat. Sometimes we get a hovercraft, so that's quite fun as well. And this is just an example of one of the maps that our GIS guys come up with. You can see the cable route going through the area and the different types of sediment and biotope that we found. I'm not going to talk too much about this because Keith's already mentioned it, but we also have ornithological surveys where you either have, in our case, the vessel-based transect. So you have a transect around the shore area that you want to look at, and you go up and down it as per the law. But we can also be supported by aerial surveys. And often this will incorporate a marine mammal survey at the same time, because a lot of the time when we do actually get observations of marine mammals, it's on a boat where there isn't much noise associated with it, and you can actually see quite a lot of marine mammals around. And this is also can be used to ensure the protection of special protection areas, which are designated under the EU for protection of bird species, so things like Hule, migrating birds such as, I think it's Brent geese as well, or barnacle geese, pink-footed Brent geese and barnacle geese that come over from Europe. So moving on, as I said, that's the survey area covers, and what we can also do, a large part is assessment. So from our field surveys and desktop studies that we'll have from people who have done previous field studies, we can then produce a baseline ecological status for the area that the developers want to use. And from this, we will then move on to creating the environmental impact assessment. As he said, it can be a very large document, depending on what sort of species you find. And as it's defined here, it is a rigorous, transparent and objective exercise So we want to make sure that the regulators who are going to give consent to these developers understand exactly what it is that they're intending to do, and that all parties can see what each other's incentives are. So initially what this document is for is to identify potential impacts, determine their significance, and if necessary, so if they are quite negative impact, will have a little bit of significance, or quite in some cases a lot of significance, we can help them to develop mitigation procedures that prevent the impacts from being as large as they could be, and then re-evaluate the significance. So these are the sorts of questions that the environmental impact assessment might ask. So, for example, will cable laying mobilise sediments that will smother fish spawning habitat? There may be, there might not be. There might not be any fish spawning in a particular area. That's what the baseline studies are for. They're supposed to uncover what sorts of things are there and whether or not we need to guard against damage to them. Will noise from pile driving displace harm to marine mammals? More than likely, as long as, you know, if they're there. It's a very loud noise. It's going to upset most things. That's as in full of boats. Will electromagnetic fields adversely affect elasmographs? So that's your sharks and your skates and rays. These are organisms that have electroreceptors in their face, and they use them to pick up the electromagnetic fields that naturally occur within the environment. They then use those for things such as hunting, communication within each other's groups, as well as sometimes people believe for migration. And these, if you're putting in lots of subsea cables, these are the sorts of things you need to think about, because they might, or they do, give off electromagnetic fields, so we need to take those into consideration. As we said before, there's lots of legislation that's trying to prevent key species who are possibly threatened from being damaged by people wanting to develop offshore oil and gas, renewables, whatever. And we have two sets of directives. We have the Habitats Directive, which covers species and habitats, and then the Birds Directive, as I mentioned earlier. For species and habitats, you can designate special areas of conservation, and these are like certain species that are highlighted in them. So here we have the harbour porpoise, and as was mentioned earlier, the Sabularia spinulosa. This is the subtidal form. We also have the intertidal form, which is Sabularia alveolata. So, once we have all of this information together, we then produce what is called an environmental statement. This will basically summarise everything that's there, say what impacts are potentially going to happen, and then say what the significance of those impacts are. And then what we do is negotiate what we've decided could be effective mitigation procedures. So it might be such as employing potential restrictions, or change the design of the actual development. So you might change from using particular vessels to ones that are better equipped to deal with or prevent so much disturbance to the organisms that are there. And then, if the environmental impact assessment and the environmental statement is accepted and the consent applications are approved, ta-da! We have our wind farm finally, after an extremely long process in some cases, especially with the larger farms. But our job as CMAX does not end there. We also go on to monitoring. Monitoring really is kind of a lead on from the baseline. So what you'll have is continuing surveys to measure the variation from this particular starting point. It's also a very useful tool to try and analyse and assess how well the mitigation procedures have worked. So mitigations such as marine mammal observations and passive acoustic monitoring that I'll speak about in a minute, and also monitor whether the limitations that put against these impacts, whether or not they're successful. So if we said one of our mitigations is no piling or drilling during peak spawning for a particular species of fish, how well has that worked? Has it affected the amount of spawning and recruitment, or did it not really work, and did it still affect it quite badly? Monitoring also enables us to kind of find out more about things that we don't know, such as the impact of electromagnetic fields. Can we find out more information so that in future environmental impact assessments we have more data on which to assess them and see what the significance of these may be? And typically, monitoring can be prescribed for 5 years or as the environmental statement. So very quickly, I'll speak about marine mammal observing. This is one of my favourite things, really. We go out on a boat, sometimes it's stupid o'clock, and we go around the vessel. Sometimes we get good weather, sometimes we get bad weather, but you're basically just chilling out looking at the sea and trying to see what you can see as this piling vessel is whacking this great big monopile into the floor. The reason it's important that we do this is that submarine animals use echolocation. So as we were talking about electromagnetic fields for elasmobranchs, as I'm sure you all know, dolphins and some whales and some seals also use sound for hunting and communicating on an everyday basis. So if we're putting loud underwater sounds into the environment, such as the hammering of the piles or the drilling of the piles, it can potentially affect the communication of these animals within their groups. And it may also cause some harm. We have found studies where you can actually rupture the internal organs of some species, which is why this is important. What you'll do is you'll go out for an hour before or 30 minutes before piling starts, and you'll watch and make sure that nothing's in the area. And then while the piling begins through the soft start, so the ramping up process, you never start full out. We'll watch throughout that and make sure that nothing actually enters the area so that we can advise the piling vessel on what actions to take. So this isn't really mitigating against any negative impacts that can happen on fish as well as marine mammals. So to go hand in hand with the MMO work, we also have passive acoustic monitoring. So what this shows here on this screen is what one of our pan screens will see. It's like this big mark here. It's from when each time the hammer strikes the pile. And we'll be looking at that screen, and amongst that we'll be looking out for any sounds that are picked up while animals in the area will be communicating. And it's mainly used during poor visibility or at night time when marine mammal observation isn't working quite so well. And both PAM and MMO are really utilised so that we can ensure that the developers are sticking to the constraints that were upheld or determined for their environmental licence to be granted. So we can also get good things coming out of monitoring. Colonisation of monopiles. This is believed to have an artificial reef effect. So people are saying, oh, if you go and develop in particular areas, it's going to be bad for what's already living there. But in some cases, when there wasn't anything there before, it can be very beneficial to the area and improve things such as recruitment by creating this artificial reef. And fish often aggregate around the area. So whereas you might previously be worried about pushing away marine mammals, they might then come into the area more because you've got more fish, because there's been more food provided by the artificial reefs around the monopiles. But also, monitoring is important on behalf of the developers because we need to assess how these artificial reefs might be affecting the status of the monopiles. So this is just a quick slide to show you the zonation of some things that might grow upon the monopile. I mean, sometimes you're speaking, what, 20 years for a monopile to be in place? And you can imagine that after this period of time, we're going to get a lot of growth growing on there. These are just some nice photos that we have of some colonisation. So we have the edible crab here eating some mussels. Here we have some shoals of fish. And then this one we've got lots of serious big starfish living on the growth that's on there. So that's kind of the end of my presentation on preserving the environment and how CMEX hopes to try and do this whilst still pushing forward to exploit the, some people believe, copious amounts of energy in a renewable form offshore by making use of the tools that we have, so by our desk and field studies, environmental impact assessments and environmental statements, by employing the right mitigation and monitoring, and then overall benefits, we get nice clean energy without hopefully too much damage to the marine environment. There you go, I'm festive. I'm feeling festive, so you can festive. Merry Christmas.